what policies would you recommend to help unlock Indonesia's economic potential, especially given the government's economic growth target of 8% in 2028 until 2029? What do you think are the challenge, opportunities, and solutions for Indonesia?
Well, the way I look at countries, Safrina, is I look at looking at the five kingdoms of macroeconomics: taxation, government spending, monetary policy, regulatory policy, and trade policy. That's the way I look at it. So tax policy is extraordinarily important. I know a little bit about Indonesia on tax policy, but what you want to have is the lowest possible tax rate on the broadest tax base. That's the good tax policy. You have some other taxes that I'm very familiar with. I don't know if you've seen my book, A Handbook of Tobacco Taxation, but in Indonesia, tobacco taxation is a very major source of revenues and for good functioning of government. And you know what you want to do on there, you want to have, tobacco products are harmful to the smokers, and so you want to tax the tobacco products to get people to use less of them, but you also want to raise the revenues there. So you want a specific tax, not an ad valorem tax on tobacco. You want to make sure that it captures all of them, and you don't want the tax to go so high that you create contraband products that are made outside of the law, that you get smuggling, you get bad practices, you get really unhealthy outcomes to the country. So that's what I would do with taxation. Government spending, of course, has to be kept under control. That's really important. Sound monetary policy in Indonesia means really fixing the exchange rates to the best currencies and really intervening there so you get a stable world price level for Indonesia. And then low regulations. Now, Indonesia has a lot of regulations, a lot of restrictions. The more you can reduce those regulations, the better off. And what we talked about earlier, free trade. Free trade is absolutely essential to Indonesia's prosperity and the ability of Indonesia to achieve its dream of very high growth, which I think Indonesia can achieve.
Right, sir. I would really love to hear your take on the principles behind the Laffer curve applied to developing economies like Indonesia's, where the balance between tax revenue and economic growth is always a tricky one. What's your take on this, sir?
Tricky, but in less developed countries, in countries that aren't as developed, let's say, as the United States, which is pretty much every other country, you have to be very careful on not overtaxing the economy. If you tax something, you get less of it. If you subsidize something, you get more of it. You know, it's very difficult growth policy if you tax people who work and you pay people who do not work. That's not a good policy. So what we want to do is tax workers very lightly so you don't discourage them from working, so you don't encourage them to shelter their income and not report it and cheat on their taxes. That's really bad for growth. So very, very low tax rates on the broadest possible tax base is the best way for government to make sure that it has the requisite revenues to do good economic policies and government expenditures. That's the way to do it. The Laffer curve is very powerful in countries like Indonesia because a lot of people do cheat on their taxes. A lot of people stop working. A lot of people hide their stuff. That is really important that you don't discourage market growth, market economics.